Hey everybody, welcome back to Andertons TV. This is a treat. Dweezil Zappa.
Hello, hello, hello.
I must admit there are a handful of guitar players on the planet that I hope we will get through the doors of Andertons from a personal perspective. So it's a big
and
tick.
I'm not one of them.
It is a big tick in that box for me because I just think, we share so many guitar players that we both like, and I could just sit and listen to you play all day. So thank you.
Thanks for having me.
And as always with these things, we're just going to start talking.
Just jump in.
And see where we go.
Sure.
But I guess it's impossible not to start this conversation by talking about, life growing up and what's fired your interest in guitars.
Sure.
And I suppose not many people on the planet were surrounded by the kinds of musicians you were surrounded by growing up. So shall we start with let's get that crazy
inspiration.
Yes.
So when I was a kid, like maybe 4 or 5 years old, I started to really realize what my surroundings were, and my dad was making the record called Apostrophe when I was about 5 years old, and it had a song on it called St. Alfonso's Pancake Breakfast. And when you're a kid,
child friendly,
yeah. When you're a kid and there's a song about pancakes, you're like, this is for me, But the thing was, I always liked hearing the music, and then I started to notice that people were having fun while they were playing it. It seemed almost like a magic trick that they could do this stuff. And in my dad's music, there's so many different kinds of instruments, and it's more like classical instruments or like classical music, orchestral in its arranging and all that. So I think kids generally, when they just hear all kinds of different sounds and they start to learn how they can possibly go together, it forms the fabric of your imagination. Mm-hmm. And so I just thought it was really great to see all this stuff. It looked like it was so much fun. And the guitars that he played, the SG with the horns, looked like a bat, I just thought it was so cool. But I never thought at that point, I'm going to do this. It was not until I was maybe 6 or 7 that I actually was given a guitar. It was like a Fender Music Master, which kind of looks like a Duosonic.
Yeah.
And a pig nose. And I would just kind of bang on it and just make noise, and it just really didn't sound that good, so I didn't stick with it for any length of time. But when I was 12, I started to hear stuff other than what my dad was actually making or listening to, because I didn't listen to the radio until around 12 years old, and that's when I started hearing whatever was on the radio, which happened to be hard rock and metal in Los Angeles. So Van Halen was basically blasting all the time, and Ozzy Osbourne with Randy Rhoads playing. So I heard this stuff that was very guitar-centric, and it made me want to play guitar even more than watching my dad do it, because when I saw my dad do it, I thought, that would be great, but you gotta know stuff to do what he's doing. Like, right. I'll get to that one day. But the Van Halen stuff and the Randy Rhoads stuff was so guitar-centric that I felt like I could just focus on just what I was hearing there and try to learn that stuff. And that's what happened when I was 12. I got way into it, which, was a great thing, because that's the most popular music probably in the world at the time was hard rock. It was the top of the charts.
Yeah.
So it felt like a really exciting thing to be part of, like, the riff writing and, all that stuff.
For most people who obviously didn't grow up in that environment, the idea that these guys that you were hearing on the radio just coming round and hanging out, I mean, I'm guessing if you're in it, you don't know any different, so that's normal, right?
Well, the thing is, you have to put it into perspective where there was no such thing as YouTube or social media or even MTV at the time. So if you were a fan of music, you would buy a record, you would read the liner notes, and you would sit and you would just listen to the music. You didn't do other things. The music was the main focal point, and it was the entertainment, and you lived in this world of imagination with the music, which is impossible for you to describe to a younger generation, because they just don't understand why you would even want to do that, because they want to do 12 things all at once. But for those of us from that generation, as things progressed, where, okay, then MTV came along and the visual element almost destroyed that experience I just talked about, where you sat and imagined the music as whatever it could be. Now you're being told what the music is with the visuals that go along with it. And then it has just progressed in a bad version of evolution from that point. But when you talk about like the people that might have come over, my dad wasn't really the kind of ringleader to bring a lot of people in. But every so often something unique would happen. And one time we got a phone call to the house from a guy purporting to be Edward Van Halen. We had no way of knowing because it could have been anybody. You know, I didn't know what he sounded like. I'd never heard him talk in an interview because there was no way to do that unless you heard a radio interview, which would be few and far between. And you only knew people from photographs or the album covers. So my mom said, there's a guy who says he's Eddie Van Halen. I'm like, say what now? And I get on the phone because at that time you could have a phone in each room and anyone could pick up the line and listen from another room. And so I was listening to this guy talking, and the only reference I had in my mind was there was that part in Unchained where somebody says, "Come on, Dave, give us a break." And I was like, I don't know if that's Edward or if that could be their producer, Ted Templeman, which turns out it's Ted Templeman.
Right.
But I'm like, this has got to be Edward, you know, because the 12-year-old who's obsessed with Van Halen wants it to be. Turns out it was, and he does show up. He comes over to the house because he lives, you know, or lived very close by, you know, maybe within like 15 minutes or less. But when he got there, he was wearing the Van Halen jumpsuit from Women and Children First, the Van Halen necklace, and he brought a guitar, not in a case, just holding it, and he's coming up the stairs. And I've told this story a lot of times, but to me, really, it was like seeing a superhero in real life. I mean, the way I saw it, it was like backlit with a smoke machine and like, oh!
It probably was. You know,
Yeah,
he arranged
so,
that as well.
So the thing about it is that I can't describe what a unique experience it is because it was so monumental and life-changing in the sense that as soon as he came in, he had the guitar. I was like, you got to plug in and show me how you play Mean Street, how you play Eruption. And he played all these things, and I could not play that stuff at the time at all, but I could see where he put his fingers, and I could just memorize when he played it, like, okay, I know that part's around here, and then he goes up here. So it made it possible for me to sit and listen to the record and then imagine, okay, well, there's only so many choices that you can have in these areas. And it was the best thing that could have ever happened because I would sit and listen to records and I could start mapping out the guitar and listen by ear and really train myself to play. And what came from that initially, which is how I still play today, was I used to like hit an A note, you know, on an open A string, and then I would just listen to notes against it. So I'm like, that doesn't sound so good. That one sounds pretty good. And so I started to figure out which notes sounded good against an A, and then I realized that there were certain shapes that made sense. So I mapped out the pentatonic scale, not knowing it was the pentatonic scale. But then what I realized was, wait a minute, there's a lot of things that are symmetrical and the same. So like if you're putting your fingers on one string, it's the same place on the next string. And I started to look at the guitar as 3 sets of 2 strings because there's only so many places that you can put your fingers, and then it's divided by octaves. So it's the exact same fingerings. And so I started playing like that as a kid. And even now when I explain it in detail to people, they're like, wait, I still don't understand what you're talking about. I'm like, there's only so many fingerings. You don't have to think about learning a full scale across the neck. You just need to know a couple of the shapes and know where the octaves repeat. And now you are like chunking the thing. You don't have so much to memorize. So that's how I got to it. But it all was stemming from that one day where I could see how Ed mapped out the guitar neck. And it was like I was off to the races.
It's interesting how you talk about shapes, because I think, I mean, you're a completely different level to me as a player, but I visualize shapes, and I think more recently I've begun to have a greater understanding of where do I want the finger to go if I want to achieve a certain interval. So if I can hear like, oh, it wants to be a
half
semitone
step
or a full step or whatever, it's just like I know. So, but I'm sort of thinking about, particularly some of the music you were talking about composing when we were having lunch. That to me sounds like it needs a much greater understanding of music theory, or are you still very much just, because I tell the story about I know we're going to
Sure.
leap around,
Sure.
but just approaching that composition piece you did for an orchestra,
Right.
Where you're almost sort of dragging shapes and on a screen though this time,
Right.
rather than on a neck.
So, long story short, I recently played with the Metropole Orchestra in Holland, and they are some of the very finest musicians in the world. Like, you see them, and it's like watching top form Olympic athletes that are doing humanly impossible things. These people can sight read the most complex rhythms, and they really can bring beauty to whatever they're playing just as they're seeing it on the page, which is shocking. Anyway, I was asked to write some orchestral music a few years back, which was for a 100-piece orchestra. And I had never done that ever in my life. And I was thinking, well, this is going to be a challenge. But I was only up for the challenge because I had been touring my dad's music for about 14 years or 13 years at that point or something like that. And I just learned a bit about arranging and knowing that each instrument has its place within the arrangement. And there's certain frequency ranges where you can add excitement, and then you can, as a listener, you can still listen to multiple layers of things without it getting too distracting. And that's really what orchestral music is finding a theme and then building on the support elements that give you the surprise elements that happen in the music. Sometimes you can predict the cadence that's going to happen, sometimes you can't, and that's what's really kind of fun and exciting. So when I was building this piece of music, I don't play keyboards, I barely play guitar. So the thing is, I sat there on a computer screen and I took MIDI notes and I ran them in a string of 16th notes, and then I just drew a shape, and I thought, all right, let me just find something that sounds like a melody that I would like to hear, and I have 30 seconds that I'm going to write. Knowing that the whole piece has to be 14 minutes, I just was looking at it on a timeline. I'm like, wait, here's 30 seconds of this thing. I wrote a melody, then I wrote a counter melody, and I did some support things. So now I have a stack of instruments, and there are 30 seconds of music right there, but I could start to hear what an orchestral piece would sound like in that 30-second range. And that gave me the ability to say, okay, I want this theme to come back again on the timeline, and again another time, but now I have to fill in the gaps. So it helped me create the structure that was needed to write this piece. But still, if you were to hear the piece, it's like an audio movie. It's a journey that you take and go through all these different places in time and different emotional feels, and it changes tempo, and there's lots of things. But I never would have done that at all had I not grown up the way that I did, hearing what's possible in music and having the idea that I could just experiment until it sounded good to me. And the only thing that was needed at that point was to make sure that the things that I was choosing for each instrument would actually, in fact, be in the range of that particular instrument. So I didn't know how high or how low a bassoon could go, but I'd write a part for it, and then I would have to get an orchestrator to go, no, that goes beyond the range of the instrument, so you're going to have to hand that off to another instrument, woodwind or whatever. So it was those kind of decisions where I needed the assistance to make sure that the rest of the stuff was going to work out. And even at that point, I still needed an arranger and an orchestrator that could speak properly to the orchestra themselves, because sometimes there's multiple ways you could write it on a page, and they might want to see it differently, like different sections. So it's fascinating to get into all that, and it's way different than just playing in a band, because at the end of the day, that too, they're all watching the guy with the stick. The conductor is in charge, so there's a delayed reaction, because they have to see it and then react to it. So the feel of when you're playing with an orchestra is like you're almost putting on the brakes before everything, and it's really kind of uncomfortable at first. So it was a great experience. I would love to do it again, and there's going to be some stuff on my YouTube channel soon where you can see this piece of music and the other things, because we did 12 songs. They learned some of the hardest stuff, 12 songs in 3 days. My band would not be able to learn this hard stuff within a 2-month period.
That's nuts, man. I mean, I mean, it's great that we get to see that stuff on YouTube, because I was saying I'd sort of seen most people have probably seen the Steve Vai kind of thing with the orchestra, and it was fascinating to even hear just the groove difference from like a band guitar player versus an orchestral
drummer.
It must have been well, I'm really interested in hearing it. Do you think you'll have another crack at that sort of composition, or
I feel like it will be another possibility in the next year or so. I mean, maybe there'll be a reason to write some more orchestral music. But the thing that's funny is that, a lot of people know what I do basically from playing my dad's music, and you get the people that are like chained to the wall eating their mom's dog food, who are like sniping at me like, you never do anything of your own, you can only play your own music, I mean your dad's music, or you play some Van Halen, you can't do anything. So you get those people that it's like, all right, now check out this orchestral music, and then like, let me know if you can do that too. My guess is no, you might need to be unchained from the wall first, but the whole thing.
I'm one of the things I kind of was looking forward to the most about this is I said to you, I don't really know a lot about your dad's music. Right. So I worked with a guy when I first started at Andertons. So we're talking either very late 80s or 1990, something like that. So we're talking. I honestly, I couldn't have even told you whether or not this was before or after your dad had passed away. It would have been around about that time. So he gave me a bunch of albums to listen to, and to be honest with you, I can't really remember what they were called. There was definitely one I think had your dad's face with like an Arabic kind of.
Oh, Shake Your Booty.
That one. Mm-hmm. So I don't know where that is in the timeline, but I just didn't get it. Right. My recollection was these were. What would I have? I suppose proggy, very much albums telling stories. It wasn't about listening to one song, it was about listening to an album. Anyway, I didn't really get it. And I've never revisited since. And I sort of, meeting you, I sort of felt, maybe I should. But your music, I've not compared them side by side. So you might go, it's not that different. And maybe I should go and listen to Frank's stuff now. But I kind of, your music just as a guitar it appealed to me as a guitar player, because I just like to listen to anything with sort of melodic guitar playing in it like that. So I suppose those criticisms of you just play your dad's music and or you do Van Halen stuff or whatever, are they? How do you feel about them? Are they? Do you feel? Do you hear a lot of your father's influence in what you play, or do you think there are unfair criticisms?
Well, the thing is, I don't know that they're when somebody's criticizing me for playing the music, I think it's different than saying I sound like the music.
Yes.
And my music has always changed from album to album, so it really doesn't ever sound the same. For me, it's an ever evolving journey of whatever I'm into, which is the same as what my dad did. He made I think about 65 albums in his lifetime. And since his passing, there's probably been at least 30, if not 40 more that have come out. So there's a treasure trove of stuff. He recorded so many concerts, and he did it with very, very high quality equipment. So the recordings are always amazing. And most of the records that he made had live performances as the base of what the records became. So when it comes to somebody saying, making a comparison, I've never been worried about that, because especially when I play the music, my sense is if I'm able to do something that's commensurate with what he did throughout his career, and it's an apples to apples comparison, that's the best I can do. That's what I want to do. I want the music to speak for itself. If you like it, great. If you don't like it, it doesn't bother me at all. This is for people that are going to appreciate this stuff, which is like my dad's attitude to the whole thing. I don't get offended by somebody having an opinion and disliking what I do. It doesn't matter to me. So I never was, people say, it must be tough to grow up in the shadow. I'm like, I was a fan of everything he did. So if I can do something that's similar, I don't see why that's a problem. I equate it to, like, let's say my dad was a medieval shoemaker and he was the guy that invented the pointy-toed shoe. I would have to perfect the pointy-toed shoe to carry the business forward. that's how I look at it. You know, I'm still working on making that pointy-toed shoe be as good or better than the original. So my feeling ultimately with anything that's creative, I like anybody that's good at what they do. And I feel like there's a lot of people that can abide by that and just appreciate people that are good at what they do, whether it's music or sports or whatever. It's just like you can appreciate a human being putting effort into something and go, wow, I can't believe they do that. And that kind of happens with learning to play my dad's music. You can ask anybody that's ever tried to play it, even the people that were in my dad's bands. It's really hard, and it takes a lot of concentration and effort. But when you do it, it's really fun. It's a really exciting challenge. And I think that's one of the reasons why people still hold it up as a hallmark skill, ability. Like, oh, wow, you can play some Frank Zappa music? You must be good.
That is true. Do you think that some of those comments have pushed you to to expand your horizons of different genres of music? Because that's the other thing when I listen to your back catalogue. It feels like there's much more effort has gone into trying to do something different each time rather than sort of feel like stay in a lane. I mean,
well, it is that, but it's not motivated by somebody else. It's
right.
motivated by me just having new interests
Yeah.
and trying to, you know, it's like you don't necessarily want to eat the same food all the time. You might like a certain style of food,
Yeah.
but you might want to tweak it each time, you know, have a different version of your favorite pasta dish or whatever. So the point is, I like to reassess things and try to learn a new skill as often as I
Right.
can, because really, what's the point of life if you're not going to have these experiences and try to keep improving or do stuff, you know? So, but some people have a more limited scope of how things operate, and they just think, oh, you're just copying stuff, or you're just, well, first of all, if you're going to try to have inspiration from something, everybody knows when you start playing guitar, you have a few people that you really listen to, and they inform how the rest of your playing might go. And for me, for example, let's say as a kid, I wanted to learn how to play Eruption, but I didn't want to just make my own version. I wanted to learn as close to exactly what he played with the exact sound, if I could.
Right.
You know, because that to me is playing the song. If you are doing anything other than that, it's like half-assed, you know? So that's how I looked at it. And it was the same with my dad's stuff. I wanted to be able to play it commensurate with what he did, or like, why bother?
You'll have to show people this, because this kind of blew my mind a little bit earlier. And I think this is, there's no right or wrong for me in music and guitars and stuff like that. There's just what you like and what you don't like. And there are guitar players who will step into someone's shoes in a band and they'll want to put their own flavour on it.
Right.
And there are other guitar players who feel the respectful thing to do is to nail it in the way it was originally done. Show people the smoke on the water thing, because I think everybody is show.
Okay, well,
you can show people how I think it's played.
But we should play it through an amp, right? So,
I agree. And
so
thank you to the lovely people at Marshall for getting Dweezil here today.
So we have this guitar, which, let's see, we'll turn this off standby. I think we have some sound. It's probably going to be loud.
Yes.
All right, so the typical person is going to learn how to play like this. They're going to go. It's the right sound.
Yeah, we all know what song it is, right?
But listen for, and this is what's cool about the guitar is you can play the same thing in different places on the neck, and it has a different flavor. So even though that looks like the most easy way to play, it doesn't sound like the record. He plays it here. Versus now it's all like a mosquito.
But you're playing all the same double. You know, it's the same same fret on two strings, isn't
exactly.
it? But you're just using the E and the A for the first note as opposed to the A and the D.
Yeah, I'm using the thicker strings versus the thinner strings.
Yeah, that's the simple way.
Yeah, but that's how he played it too, because you know when you hear him play on a Strat, it's thick.
But you can hear that, and I'm not sure. I mean, I can hear that it's wrong I can hear that one version sounds more authentic than the other when you do them side by side. But you've obviously got an ear for just going, I know I'm playing the right notes, but I'm not playing it in the right place.
Yeah.
So is there any other examples of where you've sort of, it's commonly misplayed or...
Well, there's probably plenty, but the thing that I could tell people, and we could just show as a quick demo, and I don't need to do it with an amp on, is like, here's one thing that you could just assess for yourself, even just hearing it acoustically in the room. This note versus this note versus this note versus this note. It's going to get brighter until you get here, right? Mm-hmm. So if you can access that as an attitude or a sound that you want to use as a timbre or a flavor of the sound, then you can write with that in mind. So, I've seen people try to play like Ain't Talking About Love, where they play the thing where they start over here, like, I won't even be able to play it the wrong way because it's and when I see it, I like almost have a heart attack because it's so bad. It's like they do it over here, and I can't even play it because here's the example. You have to play it like this. But this real stringy, that kind of thing.
The brightness is part of the sound, isn't it?
Yeah, but people are playing like, it sounds so bad over here. When they're like, when they play it wrong in the wrong position, I can't even do it. But when I hear them do it, I'm like, oh, come on, who hurt you? What's wrong?
Do you ever, do you feel, I know there's a reasonable sort of age difference, but do you and Wolfgang have shared feelings of what it's like to be a guitar player with a famous guitar playing dad?
Well, the thing is, I haven't had a chance to spend much time with him. I met him when he was much younger.
Right.
But I feel like we would definitely have a lot of things in common and could have some pretty meaningful conversations about it. Because he's been a trooper when it comes to how people have treated him over the years. There's a lot of people that have given him a hard time for no reason. And his skill set is very high quality. He can do a lot of things that I think people didn't expect him to be able to do. And I'm sure it's not because he wanted to prove them wrong. He's just doing what he wanted to do. He's it's in his blood. It's a thing for him to just keep exploring.
So let's go back to the sort of, I always think sort of following in your father's career path, even if you're going in your own direction and everything like that, there's always a lot of, for all the opportunities it brings, and I'm going to make I suppose a tenuous comparison to, like, my dad started the music store and I go after him, and your dad was a famous musician, you've gone after him. So for all of the opportunities it probably brings, there's always accusations of nepotism and all the other sort of stuff. So as you were sort of starting out in your career as your, trying to be your own person and not, oh look, it's Frank's son. How do you do that? How do you just, how do you navigate through that emotionally and just deal with it?
It's just not caring about what people
Literally
think.
Just don't give a shit.
because you have one life to live, and you just decide to do things that you like or don't like. And if it turns out that you're doing the same thing that your dad did, give me an example of where a banker whose son followed in his dad's footsteps, where people said, "Oh, that's so lame. You went and did exactly what your dad did. That's so lame. You should try to do your own thing. You should be a flower salesman." It's not. Everybody in those cases is like, "Good for you. Great. You learned that skill. You can be the fancy rich guy." But if you're doing something creative, people want to say, "Oh no, it's going to be way less good. It's like there's no value in it." And maybe sometimes that is the case, but it doesn't always have to be. And my position on it is just like, I'm allowed to do stuff that I enjoy, and if you're watching me do it and you don't like it, who cares? I don't care. I'm going to do it because I have fun doing it, and I don't have to do something because you want me to.
What have been the moments in your in your career where you've collaborated with people or done something where you've really felt like, yeah, this is a moment for me. This is achieving some of those childhood.
I think what I just did in Holland, like only a week ago with the Metropole Orchestra, was I never ever thought as a kid that I would be writing orchestral music or on stage playing with an orchestra. That seemed like something that was a wild fantasy, but I've had the chance to do it. And first of all, you got to write the music. You got to go through the process of doing that to then hear somebody play it, and like I get like emotionally floored by it. It's like a huge thing to go through the experience, and I would love to keep being able to do it, but if I never got a chance to do it again, it's already one of those things where like, wow, that was great. I got to do this really cool thing, and I'm glad I did it, and whether or not there was a recording of it or not, I would still have a great memory of it.
You were even talking about some of the classical inspirations that you were exposed to even as a youngster, and I do feel that as anybody that's into music of whatever style ought to just have a crack at listening to some classical stuff, because the complexity of the composition is another level to anything that a four-piece rock and roll band could put together. So whether you like it or not, it's worth almost sort of just and we were talking over lunch, you just can't imagine how, before computers were and multi-track recorders and everything were invented, how did you even just write this down?
Well, that's the thing is the people that have always really loved music so much that they could just hear it in their head all the time, and they were then able to know the language of notating and writing it down, they had the ability to just hear it and write it. My dad could sit on an airplane, 5-hour flight, and write music and keep himself entertained writing it, and then hand it to somebody to play as soon as he got to the next rehearsal. And there was even a wild story where Ruth Underwood, who played marimba, was an amazing musician, but she did not like to solo. And my dad was always trying to get her to improvise, and he would say, "Okay, come on, just play a solo here." No, I don't want to play it solo. So my dad at one point said, "Okay, well then play this tonight." And he stood in front of her and he wrote down this melody.
For a marimba, for an instrument he doesn't even play.
Right, and so he wrote this thing, and it took him 10, 15 minutes, and he handed it to her, and so she played it later, but she was the only one playing it, so technically playing a solo. But this is a piece of music called Redunzel. Now you could look up this piece of music, Redunzel, R-D-N-Z-L, which was a joke on Rapunzel and redundant. That's why it's like if you're a woman who is telling a redundant story, you could be called Redunzel.
Right.
So this is how that name came about. But the piece of music, if you look it up and you listen to the marimba part and the whole melody that it starts the song, that's the part he wrote standing in front of her. And it's unbelievable, this piece.
Oh man, I would love to be able to do that. Look, you are here on the very kind of the Marshall guys to bring you down. And you've been over in the UK spending a couple of days at Marshall. So I guess let's do the gear. Let's do the gear chat. And give me some context of, what was your dad playing? I mean, obviously Eddie would have been cranked up Marshalls.
Right.
Is this in your blood, or?
Well, like so many other guitar players, you see a Marshall stack and you just feel like, oh yeah, this is rock. I mean, it's the epitome of rock. And my dad played Marshalls, Edward Van Halen, Randy Rhoads, all the people that I loved, they were playing Marshalls, but I didn't actually really get a chance to play Marshalls until much later on. Even though my dad had some, they were always so loud, and they weren't the real gainy ones that I was used to hearing, like Van Halen. So I didn't really know how to operate them to make them do anything like that, other than put a pedal in front of it, which didn't sound like Van Halen or Randy Rhoads. I mean, you could get closer to the Randy Rhoads sound because he did use more pedals for distortion. But when I started to learn more about what the flavor of these amps were. I really kind of gravitated towards the 60s style ones and maybe some of the 70s ones. I really like the Plexis more. But I didn't really know how consistent all of them are until I went to the factory a couple days ago. I played through 12 different amps, and some of them were vintage ones from the museum.
Right.
Some of them were just right off the line. And I was actually really surprised to find that virtually all of them have the same beast under the hood. And some of them can go a little further than others. But if you know how to dial them in, they actually all sound pretty similar, shockingly similar. But they have some new amps that they're making. They have a new Super Lead, which is modified, has a couple switches on it, and they have the new JCM 800, which is also modified. So they're just the modified versions of those two popular amps. But I had a chance to play some of them before they actually physically put them into the marketplace, and gave them some of my opinions on some things. And so then they asked me to come visit the factory and see some stuff, and we got a chance to do all this. So this is actually the first time I've been outside of the U.S. since 2019. So it's like, it's like a puppy running through a field right now for me,
You, as a player, obviously have, you've played through, earth-shatteringly loud Marshall amplifiers,
Right.
and you understand the experience that gives and the nuances that gives, and you've been a fractal user for a long time, so you obviously understand the pros of using that kind of kit. I'm a big fan of guitar players kind of using whatever is available to get the sound they want to do. But perhaps you could sum up, like, when are you leaning towards this kind of thing versus leaning towards a modeled kind of sound? What's your sort of...
Well, there's two things. One thing to make as a distinction is modelers wouldn't exist if these things didn't exist in the world first.
Yeah.
You want that sound. Like, everybody would choose to have this sound and be enveloped by the power of the sound, because it's very exciting and thrilling to hear it in the room or be next to it. A modeler can do a very good job of recreating that sound, even at a significant volume level, but where you really hear what the difference is at the end of the day when it's recorded and you A/B the two sounds, whether one was super loud or it wasn't that loud, but it was dialed in on a modeler, you are able to say, is this 50% like the original, or is it 80 or 90, or is it dead on? The modeling has gotten so much better that now you can get in that 80 to 100% range if you know how to dial stuff in. And really what it comes down to is, like, you have to know which speaker impulse response is going to get you closer to the sound of the modeled amp. And not everything has to be exactly like, oh, well, it's a Marshall, I have to use a Marshall speaker, I have to use a Marshall cap. You might find that you have a weirdly unique IR that just gives you the sound. You just have to experiment with it. So I kind of don't go by a set of standard rules. Everything's always an open experiment. I'm always trying different things. But I do find certain things that I like that work. But if I was going to go for an amp, in an amp situation, it would have to be a different gig than the Zappa gig that I'm doing, because I have to have so many different sounds available to me, and I have to be able to move them around and access them very easily on a foot switch. And I have had rigs before where I had multiple amplifiers and I did the whole analog thing. But with all the cables and all the things, it just breaks all the time. And I was constantly disappointed at having to spend hours at soundcheck trying to fix the guitar rig, because, as it traveled down the road, stuff came out of the rig or whatever. So the stuff that's built into the presets is more reliable. And at the end of the day, a finished recording with all of that stuff sounds just as good to me as if I had the other setup with the analog stuff. So it's a form over function trade-off where I'm able to do what I need to do easier with the fractal than if I had to try to build a rig that would cover every single possible sound that my dad made, which is a huge variety, and it's all layered sounds. You know, he would have his signal split 3 or 4 different ways. So he's got sometimes 2 DIs and 3 amps, you know. So you could do that in the Fractal. But in a traditional guitar rig, now you're talking about refrigerator size. I mean, it's just much more complicated. So I can see the pros and cons to all of it, but in the studio too, I might choose an amp because it's just really fun to mic it up, get another mic, you know, for a room sound. So there's a lot of good reasons to have all this, but at the end of the day, it's very important for people to, I think, respect the fact that amplifiers are why we love the sound of rock guitar. You know, you never have a digital amp that's made from the ground up, like digital component by component, where you go, yeah, I'm going to really do something with. It's always a model of an amp that you've heard in real life.
Yeah, I think there probably are some younger guys that I'm talking to now where I think that is coming. Like there will be, I think we think like that because of course all the sounds that we think are great guitar sounds are real amps and modelers are emulating them. But I've spoken to guitar players that are almost, they'll just be new sounds and they won't be an amp, they'll be a modeler.
But they still will be based on some other kind of form of distortion that has come from a familiar sound from a Marshall or whatever it is. You can definitely make hybrid versions of things in the Fractal. You can tweak, rebias, or put different tubes. Like there's the digital menu of all these things. You can put modifiers on things that you could never do in an amp.
Let's switch these amps on, because the one thing, for all of the fun that I've had with digital gear, and I accept that by the time it's in a recording or it's through front of house, whatever like that, there's really no discernible difference between real amps and digital stuff. The one thing for me that I still can't replicate with anything other than a big loud amplifier is that excitement, that inspiring sort of body moving. And while we were messing around in here, and it's just a joy to sit here and see a really good guitar player play through some loud, good amplifiers.
Well, thanks.
It just doesn't, it moves me in a way that if you were to do exactly the same thing with exactly the same modeled thing through a little pair of speakers like that, just wouldn't move me in the same way. So I know everyone watching on YouTube is going to be probably listening to it through a little speaker on their iPhone or whatever like that. So you just have to take my word for it. It's like, just run us through like the...
Sure. I'll pick up this guitar because it's got a strap on it.
And you did a great job of explaining again the difference between the 800 and the 1959 and the little baby 900 on top, which is a beast.
Yeah, so I'll just give you what I've recently learned from having a chance to play a lot of these things all at once, and then discovering that one of the amps I like the most is an amp I never even heard of, and probably would have just at face value looking at it said, nope, not for me, you know, and I'll tell you why. But let me go ahead and come over here. We'll start with this JCM modified. It's the JCM 800 modified. I'm going to turn this on. It's going to be loud, but I have a basic setting that is kind of the new stock sound, but then we'll just flip some of the switches and you'll see.
And this was the sound of rock guitar in the 1980s, wasn't it? I mean, who didn't have a JCM 800? It's
funny because I didn't always care for the JCM 800
you
sound.
were going for the lower gain, older stuff.
I liked the plexi sound, but I always wanted to push it further. Now this, I think, does a good job of getting there. So check this out. We'll let this warm up. That's the stock sound that I've just set on it, right?
Yeah.
So here's the great part. Like I could barely turn up my volume. Pretty nice, clean sound. Right, that's nice, but then... So it has clarity even when you're playing chords, you can hear the different notes in the chord, and it's very kind of chimey, and it feels like you get a little bit of that compression feel, like the sag of the tubes is something that you can actually feel with this. In the past, it's been too stiff.
Right.
So this feels better. It feels more spongy. But now let's just hear like what happens when you turn some of these switches, because you can revoice the mid-range, you can tighten up the bass. And so like, let's just like do something that's maybe slightly recognizable. It won't be the exact sound, but let's say I do something like this, you know. So that's the first sound, right? So let's revoice the mids. See what it sounds like. So you can hear a difference in these low notes here. So there's some character difference in there, right? So now we can add a different kind of overdrive. So it's brighter, but there's a lot of clarity in there. So the next thing you could do is you could tighten up the bass. So see, I like it with more bass.
Yeah.
You know?
How do you, I mean, I'm not a experienced sort of recording musician. So all of my favorite guitar sounds tend to be way too much bass end for someone to want to try and mix or put out. So, but when you're recording, do you just dial in the best sound for you, and then in post it gets edited into whatever it needs to be?
Well, yeah, you kind of have to make the foundation of the sound be what you want it to be from the get-go. And then if you have to shave off a little bit here or there because the bass, well, you're not going to really hear that much from like 50 to about 95 or 100 on the guitar. 100 hertz is important to the guitar sound. Below that, you're not really going to hear if you want the bass to come through and all that stuff. But when you're standing in front of it, we're hearing a minimal amount of that push from like 50 on up, you know. But that's kind of the fun part, you know.
So does it help as well? Because when you're trying to get that interaction with you were playing some stuff before where you were getting a little bit of feedback and stuff. It feels like you want everything there,
right,
to just record, and then I guess you can choose at that point then what you want to sort of dial out.
Yeah, exactly. But it really does depend. You have to do the sound sculpting of the whole band based around the sound that you want. Like Van Halen sounds the way it does because they leave room for the guitar to be as full range in the tone that he creates. And it's just a three-piece, you know, until they add keyboards. Yeah. So you want to go to the next amp?
For sure. Now, the Plexi is probably the most famous of all Marshall amplifiers. It's also the one that for me growing up was the one, if I ever plugged into a 100-watt Marshall Super Lead, I made the most horrendous noise through, you know, just as in like, and then you would go, how on earth was anyone like Van Halen or Hendrix or any of those, how on earth were they getting great sounds out of this amplifier? It's impossible. But of course, they were just much better than me and could play well at loud volumes. But the modified 1959, I think now lets, you know, more modest players get those sounds.
There is a switch on this when we will hear it, and it will definitely make it so that you could play with more gain at a lower volume.
Yeah.
In fact, when you're at that, it's actually not loud enough. You can't make it any louder, which it's great for recording and on stage unless you are trying to play to a much bigger audience, and then you need to have the PA system doing all the work, which is actually really important for people to know. The quieter you are on stage, the better the PA is going to be able to put your instrument out there to the audience. Because if you're too loud on the stage, the first 20 rows are going to hear you from the stage, but
Yeah.
no one's going to hear you in the back of the room.
Yeah.
You know, so that's the problem. All right, let's go ahead and turn this on. This has a master volume, which I do not have all the way up, and it has the actual channel volume all the way up. But the interaction with the master volume and the channel volume is important, because if it's all cranked up, this clipping circuit becomes almost inaudible. It doesn't actually do its job. You have to back it off in order to hear what it does, and you'll see in a second. But right now, so we have two different mid voicings on this thing, and then we have the clipping, and you could use the bright side of it, which it's bright enough. You know,
Yeah.
I never use the bright side, and as you can see, I don't have the presence on or the treble on at all. But the treble, or the presence, when you do have it more open, it does add gain, so you do get something from that. But it's just often too bright for me.
I think your guitar choices are bright guitars as well, aren't they? I think when
they're not super crazy bright for the most part. These Super Strat ones are brighter than the SG for sure.
Yeah.
So what we'll do is we'll hear this. This is even louder, and this is going to be kind of more like AC/DC style. It's not super high gain right now, but. Now I could go ahead and make that much more gain if I crank the master volume, but that would be like unbearable in here. This is like as much as I can tolerate right now at that level. But what's cool is this clean sound.
I think until you've played, 100-watt head through a 4x12, it's just not. Again, I'm just looking. We've got a decibel meter behind you, so it's not super scientific, but it hit 111, which is pretty loud in here.
Yeah.
And it's just everything's moving.
Right.
There's a very different sensation to making music.
It's a sympathetic ring to everything. We're all like the atoms are bouncing off of each other here.
And it just makes me smile. You know, it's just and that I think is like, if you're just searching for that, how am I going to get that extra 1 or 2% out of this performance?
Yeah.
It's just something like that has to just go.
It can. So here's the thing. You could use something else to knock this down, like, some kind of variac type of thing, a power break or something, right? But this amp has this switch here, this extra clipping circuit here. Now, what I like is that this cleans up so nice, and it feels more comfortable to play than like a Fender clean for me, because it's kind of compressed from here. Whereas the Fender is like a little more stiff. They could still be relatively the same amount of clean, but this just feels like, because you could keep going with your volume knob, you're going to have another kind of layer of some fuzz or something. So it works nicely. But let's hear what happens when we get into the gain world. But see, that feels good, and like it's ready to react. Like it'll go into a nice bit of feedback,
It felt like it wanted to go more when you had less gain on it, which
it probably would, but that's just proximity and volume.
Right. Yeah,
right. But the thing is, there is a feeling of how do you control or tame the beast when you're playing these, and that's kind of one of the things that Edward Van Halen loved, was that the thing was just always ready to be on fire, and same with Jimi Hendrix, but. We can hear it like a different voicing now. Even more gain and lower volume, right? So. you get a Van Halen vibe out of it at this volume level, but that's as loud as you can make that part of it go.
Yeah, right.
Which is not a bad thing, but unless that's the sound you wanted to be on stage, and now you're not loud enough.
Yeah.
So there's some quirky things about this version, but it gives you a lot of access to different tones in the studio. And this would actually be a good sound for, you know, a club gig, and it still cleans up. I mean, you get some good Van Halen vibes out of the thing. For me, I wish I could make it go just a tiny bit further, but it does have the kind of spongy feel. It's not super... a lot of times when you are at a low volume and you're trying to get this sound, it feels a little bit flat. It feels a little bit, you know, cardboard, but like too stiff. But this actually still stays in the realm that I like. So let's move on to the next one, because I know we have to actually do a gig tonight.
How are we? Yes, well, it's fine. You know what? We're just going to be fashionably late. It is what it is. I liked your analogy of just, you have to tame that amplifier, and it made me think you're right. Like if you're, I can imagine a player like Eddie Van Halen or you know, or yourself or whatever, just going, I have literally got this amplifier so on edge here. It's like one mistake is going to be like so loud, and I don't know. I think that excitement of putting yourself in as a professional musician in a place where you're really testing your own ability to use this equipment. You know,
yeah.
Like
well, the taming part of it. What's also good about it is like, you tame it just enough so that there is a comfort level, but when it goes into its extremes, you get to flow with it. You know, that's where the feedback and other cool sounds come from. You got players like Hendrix or, you know, Edward is a great example. He put noises into his playing. So he liked bits of feedback or making other noises that could come through the amp. And you get to excite the room with that, and that's where all the energy comes from. Yeah. So here's this. This is the JCM 900 studio amp. Now, just if you were to, until I played through this thing, if I was to look across the room, I'm like, no, I don't want to try that one. Right. I don't even want to touch that one.
What, it's too small or too modern looking? Or
because I never cared for the look of these or the sound of the original JCM 800, I'm like, a 900? I didn't like the 800. You know, so the problem is the perception, the visual perception is often everything, right? Had this come in looking like this, I would be like, I want to try that small plexi there. Like, let me see that thing. But when I did play through it, I was like, you know what? I actually feel most comfortable on this amp.
I think, and this is just my feeling, I don't think that the 900 was like, can we have a JCM 800 but with more, please? And I don't think they actually did a great job of that on the original 900. I think on the revisited 900, they've done it this time. I'm not sure how close this is to an original 900, but what it definitely is the 800 with more, done well now. Right. So I think it's a great little amplifier, that.
Well, so we'll hear it, and what is happening under the hood, which you can feel, is that the tubes have to work harder, so you get more sag. And it actually makes it easier to play, and it gives you can have gobs of gain, but you still have the control and the clarity. So
haven't you got reverb now as well?
Yeah, it's weird because it's a spring reverb, which doesn't necessarily, you don't hear spring reverb on AC/DC or Van Halen. But you know, you could because the A channel is meant to be the clean channel. Right. But I actually prefer the A channel cranked all the way up to get the distortion sound. But we'll hear both channels.
Yeah, sure.
So let's. I mean, it really feels good when you're playing it and you have the right amount of gain, but it still cleans up.
I know we're doing the conversational thing, but I'm that last piece. I'm sure people would love to see. It's such a cool riff playing that stuff.
Well, yeah, I mean, I can attempt to play parts of it. It feels like the Van Halen amp, and I've played it.
Right.
So I feel good, like it's comfortable in the playing style for something like this.
So that's, again, I think that's always a misconception for newer players. Is, your Eddie Van Halens and your Angus Youngs and all those kind of guys, it's not as much gain as you think there is on the sound. It's a lot of power more than gain as such, isn't
Well,
it?
for the earliest Van Halen stuff, there is a pretty significant amount of gain.
Okay.
But later on, less. Like 1984, way less gain than on the first 4 records.
Right.
But now let's go to the B channel where it's going to have even more gain available, and you can kind of change the mid focus of it. But I prefer, like I said, just the cranked, clean channel, because it feels like the Plexi, but more.
Right.
So let's see what we have here. What's funny is, again, I have the presence all the way off and the treble all the way off.
Okay.
And I don't have any reverb on, but let's hear just like the difference between like this part, So here's the other one. So there's more mids when you engage the B channel, and I didn't change anything. I still have, like, the mid is actually all the way up, the bass is all the way up, and the gain is all the way up. But this is the thing, like, if I probably added more presence or treble, we would get on the B channel probably a different kind of sounds. But this might be brighter. See how there's just more like saturated overdrive on the B channel, but the A channel is just like flat out Plexi push.
That's a great sound. Would you mind if we grabbed another strap? Would you mind just doing like a similar kind of 2 minutes, just using one of the Shabat?
Yeah, for sure.
Perhaps you could talk us through what it was about these that you did. And in fact, whilst I'm getting you the strap, maybe take and throw one over, just tell us the story behind this, this fugly guitar as well.
Well, the strap that we'll want to grab is here. This is a guitar that came to life because this is one of the good things about social media. There was a guy that reached out to me and said, "Hey, I'd like to make a guitar for you. What do you want?" I said, "Well, hey, that's nice, number one, but let's do something unique," because he was really good at doing paint jobs, and he said, "Well, there's this other company called Vestige Guitars that makes custom stuff. I'll have them make the body and the neck, and then I'll do the paint job, and then you can put whatever pickups that you want in it." So we did, basically, we took inspiration from the Van Halen 2 Star guitar and put that kind of paint job on a Strat here, but he called his UBAB 2, but we made this UBAB 3, but that's upside down there. But anyway, the fun of it was put a Dan Electro headstock on it, just kind of make it this thing that it's never been before. And I just had fun with it because, it's like a kid in a candy store when you're like, oh, you can make whatever you want to make. And then I put a telly pickup and a gold foil and a humbucker, and it's an oddball combination of stuff. So that's what this guitar is. I enjoy it. I only got it like a couple weeks back, so it's got kind of a Van Halen-y vibe. But let's go ahead and pick up one of these.
Let's have a little look at this one. You'll be forgiven if you're not familiar with Shabat. I mean, I met Avi 3 years ago, maybe 2 years ago, at one of the shows, one of the guitar shows, and he's impossible not to love. You know, he's such a sweetheart guy, making some fabulous guitars, and all the other builders that who were at the show, who I already knew when I was chatting with them, they were all going, the guy you need to go and see because he is making some really cool stuff is Abbey. So I'm so I'm a big fan of his guitars, you know. But you're probably the most recent sort of high-profile artist to start using them. So what's your journey?
I had met
Shabat?
him because my front of house engineer was friends with him. He said, "Oh, my friend makes guitars. You want to see some?" I'm like, "Yeah, I love guitars. You know, bring them over." You know. So he made some really great Strats and Tellys, and it was a while before I was able to get a chance to say, hey, well, what if we can make something that is just special for what I want to do? And when he made it, it just became like, wow, you know, it would be cool if other people, if they like this guitar, could have an opportunity to get one. So what's good, it just feels very comfortable straight out of the gate, and it's a nice balanced sound. And I use the Vega Trem because I just like the feel of it, and I have it set super loose for these kind of like Jeff Beck style things. But I love the quality of the way it is, and I love that it's like handmade, and it's made in a very small shop, and it's people that just care about what they do. So I feel good about being able to support that kind of business plan when people are, you know, a lot of people say, oh, these things are so expensive. It's like, people are being paid a good wage to make these stuff. They're not, nobody's like sitting back on a yacht after making one of these things. You know, they're working hard and they're doing their thing. The other funny thing is, you know, a lot of people are like, oh man, it's all, you know, messed up, you know, like why would you relic it? It's like, in the way that I play, I would never relic a guitar, but it's kind of fun to have a beat up guitar because it makes me play more aggressive on this guitar. It's just a mindset. I like it. If you don't like it, doesn't bother me. You could get it paid, you know.
Yeah,
like
I think that, honestly, I don't think there's anything on the internet that causes so much anger than relict guitars.
Yeah.
You know, this sort of idea of a contrived old guitar.
Yeah, they're like, oh, it's got to earn its stripes.
Yeah, but there's part of me, it's like, fine. It's just like, nobody, don't buy one of them. But I genuinely think there is a thread of every guitar player does say, like, if you've got a brand new, imagine buying a Paul Reed Smith, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful guitar. The first scratch is a heartbreaker, right? It's so you try not to scratch it, inevitably, which of course I think it just makes you play within yourself,
right?
So I'm with you. I mean, I love relic guitars, and I just like them aesthetically.
Yeah.
But I do genuinely. It's like you're not going, oh, careful,
You're
careful.
not too precious with it.
You just bang straight
I got a really
into it.
good story about that, by the way. I had the fortunate opportunity to be invited over to Jeff Beck's house one time, and it was oddly for a costume party where I went to the BBC costume department and I got like this full-on chainmail Knights costume. I mean, it was heavy.
Right.
This thing was uncomfortable to wear. And I show up at this party, and we have virtually the same costume on, but he's like King Arthur, and I was like some other king, right?
Sir Lancelot.
Yeah. So he took out a sword and knighted me.
Brilliant.
Yeah, and then later, you know, he's like, "Oh, let me show you this guitar," and he picks up this Strat, and he says, "This is like a really early Strat," you know. And so he picks it up, and as he's turning it around to show me the serial number, he bangs it on the corner of a stone table that has like a really sharp edge and puts a big ding in it. And didn't even flinch. He looked at it for a second and then just continued to hand it to me. Didn't care at all. But it was like serial number 2. You know, so.
But these are to play, right?
You know,
I kind of feel there are so many beautiful instruments that are now in vaults because people are too frightened to play them, and they were all built with one purpose, and so you have to play it right, you know.
Yeah, I think so.
I know you're going to play a set. I thought your Vega Trem story was funny. So, like, why can't you have?
Well, the
guitars
thing is, like,
with Floyds?
I had a lot of guitars with Floyds in the '80s, and I liked them, and I never had any problem with them. A lot of people are like, oh man, I struggle with them. I always, from day one, even though nobody ever told me to do it, I would put the string in from this side and leave the ball end and then just cut this part and put it there. Because if you ever broke your string, you could just unwind it and then wind it back up, and you didn't have to deal with cutting the string there. It was just, but I didn't ever have trouble with parts failing. A lot of people talk about different versions of it with parts failing and it never stays in tune. They all worked great, the ones that I had. The problem I have now is it's too reminiscent of the 80s for me, and I feel like I'd rather struggle with the guitar going a little bit out of tune because it would give me some more personality or more of an option to have to like find a way out of the predicament I just got myself into. It just feels more, you use it in a different way. You end up being like slightly more musical with the vibrato bar because of it, instead of just a bunch of goofy tricks. I'm not that excited by the crazy whammy bar tricks. You know, it's not for me anymore.
I think I just like the aesthetic. You're avoiding it because, you know, it's like wearing a jumpsuit and a bad haircut.
Yeah, like a members only jacket and some Capizio jazz shoes. Yeah, that's what it is. It's like it might as well be a Capizio jazz shoe right here for me. Yeah.
Anyway, look, Vega Trems are amazing as well, so go check them out. But let's have a. I mean, and your pickup choice. What you said?
Well, these are Lawlers, but this one, it's got a gold foil style cover, but it's really just kind of an underwound humbucker under this thing. And let's just see what it sounds like. I actually don't know how it's going to sound in this. We'll see. I should turn the treble back down that we were using before. Stayed in tune pretty good.
That was good.
Yeah.
I liked your little. You said a little trick as well. If your guitar goes a little bit out of tune with the trem system, don't retune it up here. Just give the arm a bang.
And that's what Eddie Van Halen had to do back in the day. You know, sometimes all you do is you adjust the string with like an invisible bend, or you tap the bar and it goes back. So that's the cool part. But the way these are set up, it's like I barely have to touch on this, and I'm able to hear like a half step pretty easily. So like a. So you get that kind of, you know, Jeff Beck type of. It's nice, but you know, it still cleans up. But what this has that other guitars don't have is like, check this out. If I go and play above the 12th fret and I pull this up, we'll hear it with and without. it's got that Octavia sound, but it's really just because it's out of phase.
That's so, I mean, when you showed me that earlier on, I just assumed the only way you could get that octave sound was with a pedal, but that's just a way it's a wiring.
It's just the wiring,
thing.
yeah. There's no electronics
cool.
or batteries or anything.
That is super, super cool. Well, thank you for showing us that.
Sure.
Well, we are reaching the end of our allotted time here, but these two somewhat prototypey looking cool little boxes on the floor need to be talked about.
Sure.
Let's start with the one that's the collaboration between you and your uncle, which is very cool.
Yeah, so this is something that I'm thinking about bringing to market, and I thought I'd just bring it here to see what it would sound like through some different amps and get some opinions from some people. And essentially, it's an overdrive, but it feels more like an amp in a box, and it also has a loop in it where you can add something in between the two gain stages. But we should kind of just check it out and see, play it through just a pretty clean amp.
A clean amp, didn't you? So we've got it set up through here. So this is my 40-watt Victory Deluxe, and it's pretty much my normal settings. Dweezil rolled the treble back a little, but it's basically clean, right? Like just a nice clean sounding.
So you want to play it, or
no? Go on, you play it.
You'll critique my playing.
I will critique it. Yes.
Yeah. All right. Here we go.
And you were saying, so the blue side is.
So they're two different channels, and I kind of, even though this is labeled as channel 2, I use this as channel 1. And what this ultimately does is you have two different gain stages, and they interact with each other. But then I have a half power switch, which is the equivalent of turning your volume down.
Yeah.
It acts the same way, and I use that because sometimes I don't have enough time to get to the volume, but I might want the sound of that turned down. So having it on a foot switch for me is important, but I think other people might enjoy it as well.
And
so,
I guess what we're hoping for in the comments section here is some genuine market research feedback, right?
Right,
it's like, what do you guys think of it? And if it came to market, you know, what might you pay for it? Just, I don't know, anything really that might help Dweezil and his uncle decide what to do with it. But I'll put a link below. I presume there'll be more information on this on your site.
Eventually, yeah. So this is just kind of like the early stages of what we're going to do. But yeah, we can see like with it, just what it without, just see what it sounds like. So that's pretty clean. Maybe still on the bright side, but we'll go ahead and deal with it like this. So we'll go ahead and put it on now. And so what we have here is the output and the gain, and it's kind of matched to the level of the amp right now. If you turn that off, you know. So it takes away some of the brightness there, right? But it also, when you clean it up, so it's like, for me, this is like a Ritchie Blackmore. Like,
you're hearing, or I'm hearing anyway, this, when you hit a valve amplifier and it's really cranked, the sound kind of goes like that and blooms, like you get that initial compression and then a bit of the bloom. And normally that only happens at high volume or with an amp really cranked. And if you listen to Dweezil playing, you'll get that sense of it's doing that, which I think is, and that is a real typical Ritchie Blackmore kind of tone, isn't it? So,
yeah. Well, like let's say like Smoke on the Water, for example. You know, it's like let me give like full gain and output here. You know. It's got the put. And we're not even at a very loud level, but quiet. If we had it up louder, you would feel that Marshall style push. You know, but up in a cool way.
I mean, relatively speaking, you guys won't probably appreciate this when you're watching this. We're about probably a quarter of the volume that maybe you were on those Marshalls. Like it's a lot less.
It's giving the untamable beast vibe.
Yes, and I think that's the challenge, isn't it?
Yeah.
Can I get that real sense of a valve amp on edge, but artificially, if you like?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, this is all analog, but here's the cool thing that we can adjust the amount of gain, and then we can under bias this, and this will turn into like a real spitty fuzz. So like, right? So we can give it a little bit more life. But now add more gain. But it's dead quiet because it's self-gating at that point. But texturally, it's really cool.
If you go to that funny out of phase setting, this sounds to me it could be a perfect kind of.
Yeah, so I could add more gain from this side.
Yeah.
Let's see.
We're not loud, are we? I mean,
no, but it feels like what you would experience if you had a super loud amp,
So if I bias this up a bit,
now we're going to have an extreme amount of gain.
So I wanted to show what the half kind of, so like go for something pretty gainy and then just show what happens with the switch.
So we can open this up so it's more amp-like instead of like fuzz pedal-like. Here's the thing.
Yeah, what's this one do?
So hit the half power again. It's like turning your volume further down. So if we were even louder, it would go into singing feedback, but this has like a really nice fundamental that it holds. So there's a kind of a weird hybrid of like Van Halen meets Hendrix meets Blackmore in all of it. It's got the feel of some of that stuff, but depending on which guitar, which pickup, it's going to just emphasize the personality. What I like about it, from my experience with it, is that it just brings out more of the guitar that you're using and more of the amp that you're using. And it's just kind of a more box.
A more box. I mean, I know the whole terminology of amp in a box is a bit overdone and cliche now, but it is doing that vintage on edge amp in a box kind of vibe. So that's very cool. Yeah. But right now, no firm idea whether that will necessarily come to market or not. So comments below.
We're planning on it. We just don't know how many people would want it. So we have to figure out how to make it for what price point and all that stuff.
Lots of people will want it. Well, we'll find out. This is I'm sure I've heard of Sound Gas Limited, but
yeah, it's a British company. and they have all kinds of weird sound devices. But this is a rather expensive preamp that can be used to distort things. And it does some really cool stuff. That's great.
That's the amp though. That is the amp for me. That just
Yeah.
it's everything that you want a Marshall to be.
But it's funny because like this is the amp. It's a great solid tone. It's like taming the beast, you know?
Jeez.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yes, it does. That's the understatement of the year. Right.
Time for a show.
It is indeed time for a show. So look, thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
I hope that if you're at the NAMM show and I'm at the NAMM show next January, maybe we can continue these conversations in some sort of part 2 video.
Sure.
But it was great to see the guitars, hear a little bit more about guitar amps and how you use them. Obviously lovely to finally meet you and hear some stories about you. I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you, everybody.
Go check out some of Dweezil's own music. If you want to find out about the gear, links will be below. Thank you for joining us again. And like you say, let the show commence. And for those of you coming tonight, we'll see you in not very long.
Yeah.
Okay, goodbye.
See ya.